So, have you figured out your Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 yet? Well, maybe you've given it a thought or two. If not, I encourage you to watch episode 66, part 1, where we break down climate literacy and lunacy of their mathing before listening to what's next. Marty Sawyer is back, the intrepid CEO of Tri-Mack Industries, and she has the advantage to bring us firsthand research so you may benefit. Today, we talk about how clear your future is in powder coatings. Whether you own a small job shop or run a factory in your town or around the world, does the picture fit the frame? Get ready to level up your powder coater game. Okay, so getting back, let's talk about what it means for powder coating. What about powder coating? This slide is about tactics to reducing your carbon footprint reduction. So yeah, we kind of touched on this earlier, which is powder selection. You know, are you going to purchase something from a multinational company that is, you know, working on being paper free, right? As an example.
Well, AXO, Exalta, PPG, all the, the list goes on and on. TCI, all of the big companies have a standard on this. They have a sustainability manager somewhere who is working on this issue, again, for their Scope 1 and for our Scope 3.
Mm-hmm. And then the next one, well, chemistry selection, I guess, obviously.
It's more of the washer.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Pre-treatment stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Equipment selection, obviously, could be gas ovens or electric ovens or infrared, UV, that sort of stuff. Process improvements. For us, as an example of that, we're now switching to a E-strip tank. So instead of using that chemical B17, we're using their E-chem setup, right? So that's our way of trying to move forward there. Waste management. There is a product out there that we featured. I think it's episode 26. Don't ask me how I remember that, but they sent us some bags where you can actually put the powder, all your used powder, spray to waste powder, whatever or old powder in boxes that you're not using anymore. You can put it in their bag. The bag is obviously heat rated. Bag. It's just a plastic clear bag, like a garbage bag. And then you tie it up and you put it in your oven and you heat it to you cure the powder and it becomes inert. So it's a great way to actually deal with your waste management. And I'm actually thinking, you know what? You could actually sell that to a bunch of like Etsy jewelry makers because it's all that Fordite. It turns into Fordite. So we actually did a show on that, and I'm hoping a lot of people are going to be using that product. I still think it's a brilliant product, and I hope these guys are going to market their product a little better. It's not easy to market into our industry, right? But it's a great way, an example of waste management instead of just throwing the powder in the dumpster.
It's funny you say that because I found that same company.
Did you?
And I assume it's the same company. I can't remember the company's name.
Yeah, it's like an older couple.
And because I was looking at the recycling side of powder and, making sure I could talk intelligently about what is the industry doing on recycling, because obviously you've got, if you're spray to waste, it's waste. And if you're recycling your powder in the booth, you have other options. But at some point you're going to have waste powder, however you're doing it, and that there's a growing trend in trying to figure out how to recycle that powder.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you're not going to come up with some beautiful specialty pink doing that, but you might come up with some fabulous grays,
right?
And some darker colors, because you're combining and all that kind of stuff. And obviously, black is,
Yeah, it was
awesome.
kind of interesting because I think I don't think he hung it. He actually just put it on the floor.
Yeah.
And it, as I recall videotaping, I would love to share it with you, is because it was sitting on the floor. And I want to say it was probably maybe about 10 pounds of powder, maybe. And we just threw whatever old stuff we had. And it had blacks and whites. And I think there was a color in there. And it when it melted into like an eye shape, which is actually pretty enough in itself. For like an artist making art or a sculpture or something like that. It could be used like that. But when he broke it, obviously it broke into little fragments and pieces. And within that was like this, the spectrum of the colors that we chose. It was actually really pretty. I was surprised at how well it came out. And I think I'm not sure how these Etsy guys do it, but I know it's a big thing on Etsy. This kind of stuff.
Anybody listening, do not put your cardboard box of powder in your oven. You must take a bag. Do not throw away your powder, because you can get in trouble for that if you throw it away and it's loose. Besides the fact that loose powder, if it puffs up, kind of could create all kinds of bad stuff, like could explode. Well, it won't explode, but it could catch on fire.
Right.
Again, on a tangent, do you know who Marty Sawyer is? He used to work for Axel Nobel, and he retired.
Yeah, I videotaped it and I put it on LinkedIn.
Oh, yeah, you were there. You were there.
Yeah, I had the perfect view, side view, and everybody loved the video I posted on it after the show. And I'm trying to get Marty on there, but yeah, that was the most interactive thing I've ever learned at a powder coating week. But in addition, in general about powder coatings and safety and stuff. It was a great demonstration. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. And for everybody who hasn't seen it, look at her YouTube, or on your LinkedIn or YouTube.
I put it on my LinkedIn one, but I'm not sure if I shared it on YouTube. I probably should. I want to have him on the show. That's what I told him.
Oh, he's great. He's great.
After I emailed him, but I know they are, aren't they? And I emailed him because he's retired. That was his retirement thing.
Right.
Was a week later. So he hasn't got, I think he's too busy retiring.
No, he works part-time, does some consulting, and his son works for Bulk Chemical, and he does some work for them and such. So he's not 100% retired. He's trying to keep his fingers in the game, and he's working on the NFPA committee. So he's really a fabulous resource, and he loves to talk just as much as I do, and he's got a whole lot more information than I do. Yeah. So I mean, he is
put a bug in his ear.
Stuff.
I emailed him, but he didn't respond. So maybe you can say something, or if I'm in a meeting or something, the next time I see him, I'm like, come on my show. Because he said, yeah, I would. But anyways. Okay. Regular maintenance. Oh, sorry. We missed this one. Regular maintenance. That'd be what? Just cleaning up your shop.
Well, the blinding glimpse of the obvious is that a clean shop is an efficient shop. I mean, yeah, we've all heard that, and people don't do enough maintenance. But what happens if you're in convection and you've got a burner and your burner gets dirty, it's going to use more gas. It has to work harder to, you don't want to, just like your home furnace. If you don't change the filters, you're going to be less efficient. You've got to keep it clean to be able to do stuff. Things like your oven walls. People have hit them with their forklift and something that's all dented in. If you ever do a infrared camera on it, you're going to see how much heat you're losing. Just feel it, and you'll feel how much heat you're losing. And the entrance and exits, and so many different ways we can look at heat recovery or heat containment so that we can be more efficient. Because the more efficient you are, the less gas you're going to use. Right. I mean, that's what this is all about. At least on the curing side, it's about using less gas.
Okay. Powder. So this one, it's got 4 things on there. It's just basically every powder manufacturer gets a green target. So are you suggesting that that's what it is now, or what you're proposing?
No, that's what right now. That's where we are in where the industry is.
Okay.
Is that the powder side is already aggressively looking at this.
Okay, I see. Reclaim and recycle, new formulations, and of course the low temp powders that are coming out for powder coating on wood or powder coating on line systems and parts and stuff like that too, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's some physics issues with some of that can affect how low we can go. The wood pushed it about as far, and that's 265. But, you do see Europe has some different, as we well know, TGIC and those kinds of things has some different rules than the US does on powder formulations. But you can get into lower temp than you can in the US, I believe, on metal. But even so, 325 is 350 is, not uncommon anymore. It's just, it's a more expensive powder. But if you can use less gas, maybe there's an appropriate offset.
Yeah.
It's all that kind of stuff you have to look at if you're buying a new oven, and you can design the oven and your process, and everything shrinks when you have less oven. The process time shrinks, the time on the line shrinks, all that stuff can go down.
So chemistry, nanotechnology, ambient temperature chemistry, don't forget about wastewater.
So there's chemistries out there right now that don't require heat. And, the nanotechnology is typically talking about the zirconium. You have to, it requires a little bit different washer configuration. So it's a great thing to look at when you're buying a washer. But even if you have a washer, you typically can convert into some different chemistries that can affect how much heat is required to get to whatever level the surfactant and the other, chemistry properties need. That's something you want to talk to your chemistry supplier if this is something that's important to you about what your options are. But there's a lot of variability in chemistries and how they perform and what they require from the washer itself.
Okay. Okay, washers, just getting into washers, efficiencies and maintenance of the burner.
Yeah, gotta love how I spelled maintenance, don't you? Maintenance.
Oh.
In case anybody, I just realized I did that.
Spell check.
Oops. I can't.
That's an easy one to misspell all the time too.
That's what it's supposed to catch for me, and it didn't do it.
I hate it when that happens. Electric heat versus natural gas. 1 gallon per minute of water going down the drain equates to about 125 gallons annually for a single shift. Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And this is like the PFAS stuff. Is that what we're talking about here?
Well, it can be, or, getting those nanotechnology based chemistries. There's several of the big chemistry companies. I know Chemetall has, several of them have them, different technologies that you can look at.
What about drag out? I don't know can you explain what drag out is?
So if you're thinking about, this is going a little bit more into the sustainability side of it, not just carbon reduction, and that your drag out is when you're in stage 1 and you drag your chemistry into stage 2, then you have to dump your tank because you did, what people love to do, and I understand why, I would do the same thing if I were them, your washer, a flow-through washer, and it was originally designed for a 6-foot long part. Well, now your business has changed and you want to run 8-foot long parts. I don't know anybody who's ever done this, ever. But when you do that, your drain backs are supposed to be the same length as your longest part. It's just the 101 rule of washer design. So if you're running an 8-foot part on a 6-foot drain back, you're going to have issues of, cross-contaminating all of your water. Well, and your chemical. Well, you could be taking your hot water into a cold tank. I mean, there's lots of things that you could do, but your tanks are supposed to be basically self-contained and do their thing. Wash, rinse, chemistry, whatever they're supposed to do. And when you have drag out, you're carrying one, and if you didn't maintain your washer, the whole thing would just be one big goo of chemical lukewarm water.
Right.
But nobody does that because you wouldn't have any, performance on the washer. But it's a matter of degrees of how clean is clean, how perfect is the chemistry for what you need, how titrated are you doing it. So when you think about drag out, it's the heat of the walls, it's the heat of the water, it's leaving the heated tank, not getting recirculated and reheated, and it's going somewhere else. So now you got to bring in new cold water or fresh water to your counterflows, all that kind of stuff that can affect how much gas your burner is going to need. Because the realities are, in our industry, most I think consider the optimal design is a burner tube. So you have this big, long serpentine of stainless steel tube, and the gas burner sits at the end and shoots a flame down that tube, and that's what's heating the water. And when you look at that, that's all well and good. That's a very efficient way to heat a lot of water because you have a lot of surface area, and as long as you're cleaning your tank from your sludge, which is a whole nother issue, but and that's where that maintenance comes in, because if people aren't maintaining their washers and you have sludge buildup, you're going to burn out your tube, and then you've got a whole hot mess. Or you don't have a hot mess, you have a cold mess because you burned out your tube. But point being that you can look at electric heat. Well, electric heat works really well in small tanks. Like in our parts washer, we typically do electric heat, even though we have designs for both technologies. But when you can do a big tank, electrically heating water,
that's really a lot.
Expensive.
Right. Yeah.
Really expensive. So we just want people to be thinking through, because washer designs are not easy to change, to modify. So if you're going to get ready to buy a washer, you want to have thought through what, that's where the chemistry can play such a huge role, because the kind of chemistry you're going to do is going to set the washer design. Mm-hmm. We as a systems house don't tell you what size washer you need. Your chemistry supplier typically tells us how many seconds in each stage they want. And depending on how much freedom you want to do a different chemistry, depends on how we design it. But again, thinking through these issues of these new technologies out there, how can that affect your washer performance, your cleaning performance, which, there's no qualitative reduction in all this. If anything, it goes up. But you do have to pay attention to how the washer's physically designed. And so like insulated walls, some people want to do it on the walls. Some people want to do it on the tanks. You can have a whole rabbit hole conversation there. But the idea is it's typically metal, stainless or possibly mild steel is what your washer is made out of, and what metal conducts. So if you've got, you want to save some energy, insulate that tank so that it's less likely that your heat is going to conduct out into the atmosphere and thereby cool your water, requiring you to put more heat back in. The value proposition of it isn't huge. At least it hasn't been for just the economic side. But, if you get into the carbon reduction side, that may tip the balance a little bit more for some people.
Yeah, right. Okay. And this next slide is decarbonization will require a dramatic shift in how industrial heat is generated. And it's almost like a complete overhaul of, an infrastructure or a behavior.
Behavior. I think that's
yeah.
It's interesting on the furnace side. They look at infrared as just radiant tubes. It's just a standard common design. Most every furnace designer, depending on what they're doing, has designs where they are either heating air or they are using a radiant tube. They're either burning the natural gas, could be electricity, or it could be a radiant tube. So they don't look at infrared as this voodoo the way the oven industry does. So it's kind of interesting.
And, also, in a sense, what we're getting at, or sort of the underpinnings here, is almost like a new, a revolution of, or a change in going from the industrial age of what we were 100 or so years ago to this new overhauled version of the industrial age. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, I would. I think that's a good comment.
Okay, ovens are the big scope number one challenge. So are these points here are meant to, what are you trying to achieve here? Use less gas? That's what you want to get to?
Yeah, I mean, the simplest way to reduce your carbon footprint in your oven is to use less gas.
Right.
It's just not any more complicated than that. The question is how. So you can, if you have an oven that you don't plan on replacing anytime soon, the first thing you want to look at is, can I turn it down? So it was designed for 450. Now you're operating 350 powder. Well, you're going to turn that oven down, or you're going to run your line faster. One of the two. You're not going to leave it in there the same amount of time. So that's a very easy way to sit there and look at how you can do that. So I just looked at and just did the math. 350 to 400 is a 15% reduction. Right away. You've just done that.
Yeah, but doesn't that extend? That extends the cure time, though.
Now that's my webinar I'm going to do later on this year, called The Art of the Cure. And I'm doing all this research with formulators to sit there and really understand what is cure. And I am shocked at how many people have a binary view of cure. It's cured or it's uncured. And when you're perfectly cured, that's true. But like quality, there's a window. But if you don't change your powder, that's going to increase your time. You got to change the powder. You got to get a 350 powder.
Okay.
Then turn down your oven. Yeah. So I guess I wasn't really clear there. But another way you can use less gas, like I said, obviously if you're starting with a new oven, there's all kinds of things you can do. Another way you can turn down your turn down your oven without increasing your time is just to add a boost. So you can typically, you can drop in a boost inside your oven with a little bit of modification, or you can drop a boost. Literally just dropping it outside the mouth of your oven, and you're going to get to gel before you've gotten to the oven. Then you can turn the oven down. You don't have to use as much power. And depending on, whether you want to use electric or gas to do that, you can get, substantive savings. So we often look at our boost inquiries are people who can't keep up. Mm-hmm. So their oven I just can't get the throughput. I can't get my part cured. I can't get there. They're not getting enough temperature, either because they're going faster or because they have a harder part, or the powder they've selected. The powder selections can have an impact on this, because all powders aren't, just because it has the same temperature, they don't all cure the same way, depending on how much fillers they have. And
that's true.
A $3 a pound powder.
Yeah. It's just a general application that they're just like, here you go, try it like this. Those cure curves might be 75 years old. I don't know, 50 years old. Yeah. Some of them are really, really old, haven't had a whole lot of update on some of your basic powders. So you're always trying to look at how to use less gas. So we're starting to see infrared come in, particularly on the wood and the sensitive substrate side, plastics, obviously. Mm-hmm. It's not as prevalent on the metal side, but it's still something that there's still a thermal component to UV, because you still have to melt the powder before, even on UV powder. But Yeah. And this is a very simple example of what you'll see from some of the custom coaters out there is, the caps that go, the center caps that go on rims, right? Many of them today are plastic. And I've seen a few coaters. Now, we haven't tried it ourselves, but I've seen a few coaters powder coat them and then just apply a heat gun to it, to kind of cure and melt that powder on there to gel it and get it cured. I don't know how long they're doing this. I'm just seeing quickie videos on it. I don't know about durability and stuff, but I mean, that's a creative way to get the center caps to match the overall look that your customer is looking for on a rim. It's just a very simplest way to kind of say what you're doing here on a much, much grander schedule or way, so I think the innovation is kind of people are curious even in the most simplest ways about how to get powder on plastic and other substrates too,
It's the simple answer is it's hard. Yeah. If you take 3D parts and composites and plastics and wood and all this other stuff that we're playing with, your window of is it going to work is so much smaller, and you have to be so much more accurate. And that's another reason why people typically go to infrared is because of controllability. When you get into very delicate substrates where you can only add so much heat for so long, and when you reach that point, you need to stop the heat. That's what, it's something infrared does very well. And most of those people have already converted to infrared because of that. But the idea of using a heat gun, there's so many cool things that can be done, but that's a one-off. You're not going to be making much money doing that because a lot of labor.
Not a lot of people. We don't do it here just because there's enough aftermarket stuff where you can just shoo can it, and it'll be no big deal, right? So we tend to just not, here you go, you're on your own. If you want to get some new ones or, paint your own, that's fine. But
because that's a big part of your business, right? Is wheels.
I think custom coaters in general, right? Some of them just specialize only in rims and rim restoration or rim polishing as well, right? There's a lot of other, there's a whole genre of powder coaters out there that just do OEM rims or just, stock rims, OEM rims, aftermarket rims, for their customers and stuff. We kind of have
those gas guzzling cars.
Right? Yeah. There you go. That's a 3.
You don't see any hot rockets on the EVs.
Are you testing me? Is that a 3?
But yeah, you think about it. Have you ever seen fancy wheels on an EV?
Hell no.
But
you know what? Those fan blade ones, they call them the fan blades on Teslas. They are so hot right now.
There's one. Yeah.
And they have, when they first came out, everybody's like, oh my God, they're ugly. But now they're like the hottest thing. Like, I have the fan blade Tesla rims. Can I get them powder coated? So anyways.
Yeah, see, I want a Tesla, not so much because of the EV part. So I want the self-driving part. I want to do it for me. I want to sit back, do my work, look at my phone, drink a glass of wine.
Take a nap. Like
Can't wait. I'm George Jetson. I want my flying car, and I'm really irritated I don't have one yet. Let's go back. We missed a couple that I think you want to talk about.
Okay, go ahead.
The electrification, we've talked about that ad nauseum. Maintaining your burner, we've talked about that. The exhaust. One of the things that companies are starting to do, and I think it will be a big growing trend, is heat recovery.
Okay.
So how many times have you gone in a plant and it's summertime and it's already 100 degrees outside, and you go in by the powder coating and you just feel like you're going to die because they are losing so much heat into their environment. And it makes it very hard to hire people, keep people. And, that's the lowest paid employees they got. And then they're cooking them, literally. So,
Shh. No.
Lunch special. Sorry, that's very inappropriate, but it's.
I don't know. Anyway. We're like knee deep into a podcast. I think
okay.
We can.
If you don't like my sense of humor now, there's no hope for you. Anyway, but if you can look at your heat recovery, and there's different technologies that are out there, either at your stack level. I mean, depending on how much volume you have, because again, it has to cost justify. All this stuff has to cost justify. And the government's trying to force us to get that cost justification ratio different by putting regulations in. Mm-hmm. But heat recovery is something that, even if it's not recovery, just not letting it escape, containing it. So, so many old convection ovens are often terrible at this. Right. And the heat just pours out of the entrance and exit of these ovens because they just don't have a good design. Or it's such a dated design that they're not doing a very good job of just containing the heat you've already paid for. We want to keep that heat in the oven. We still have to do our recirculations. And I don't put it in here, but it's something to be, I always like to mention this because I've started to see some trend in some of the more economical ovens that are out there on the convection side, the batch side, is that there's a shortcutting on the purge when you start it up. It's supposed to start up the oven faster. Can you save money? Less turns. Yes, that will save you money, but you will, first of all, you could create a major safety problem for yourself if you shortcut purge. Purge is there for a reason. It's per code. Don't ever screw with it. Follow NFPA, your insurance company, everybody, you got to do that. You can't put a VFD on a purge and turn it down and take shortcuts. It's just absolutely black and white. Don't ever do that. But your turns, which is how many times that air volume inside the oven is turned over because of CO, incomplete combustion, they're trying to prevent CO getting into any kind of atmosphere because we know that's really bad. And because older burners, poorly maintained burners are much more likely to have a much higher percentage of CO. So they're not creating enough CO2, they're creating CO. So those carbon molecules got to go to something. So they're going to go to the CO2 or they're going to go to CO. But if you're creating CO, you're often creating soot. It's another way you might have some issues. There's lots of other but if you go to your powder supplier and ask them, they will likely bring in an oven recorder for you where you can look at your oven and see how it's performing. And a lot of times that's a free service that they'll provide if you're buying enough powder. And you can see how well maintained your oven is and how balanced it is. Look at how much heat you're escaping. If you can address some of those things, either through a maintenance or a modification or an add-on or something, you can save yourself. You're going to end up using less gas. What does less gas mean? Well, less CO2.
So this is, okay, this is where I see that I can see where maybe there might be a case for more electrification. But then again, how much, we already covered how much BTU and parts wattage and all of that costs in electricity. So we already know it's starting off higher, but then one of the reasons why we have electric ovens is because, well, there's a couple of reasons. It's very expensive to buy gas here in Hawaii. So that was like the number one. Number two, the shipping for a new oven was very expensive. So we decided to build our own. And we configured it to the kind of clients that we wanted to attract. Number three, it does take a little longer to get the electric oven to temp, which we do kind of save. We lose out on time and, of course, BTU expenditure, right, or costs per hour, because it takes a little longer to get that large oven.
You don't have to.
No, we don't, and that's why I'm saying one of the reasons why we didn't want to have all this, outgassing or off-gassing of ovens and all the water collection and all this other stuff that kind of comes with these kinds of ovens. We tend to kind of don't have to deal with that. So to us, it makes maintenance a little easier. And although maybe we pay our electric rates are not too bad. We have jumped up into a new category, so we are getting charged more. We're at according to the electric guy the Maui electric guy, we're at a category of J, I think, which means that we pay the same rate that CVS Pharmacy pays for their 5,000 square foot building at the corner, on the corner. So there's some trade-off there, I guess.
There's an interesting conversation, because I have an electric division, and so I'm always paying attention to how much electricity something pulls. And I'm going to grab a chart I have right on the other side of my office here real quick that I'll read it. And this is not terribly current, but neither here nor there. So the physics of like electric infrared are not the same as far as curing. Boosting, they're pretty much interchangeable. But, a boost might be a couple hundred amps, to put in a boost somewhere. You might do less, you might do more, depending on how big, part window, and all that kind of stuff. But if you want to cure something of any size with electric infrared, it's going to say it would spin the meter, it's just shocking at how much electricity it's going to utilize to do the same work. The other issue is typically electric infrared, at least in the marketplace and how the heaters have been designed right now, is that the catalytic, there is some electric in the 1,000 degree and under, but you don't see it very often in what we do. Partly because because you can do more, you can do it so much cheaper in catalytic. If you get above the 1,000 degree kind of mark, you're kind of definitely into either flame-based infrared, which doesn't have control. It's kind of like that heat gun thing where you're just kind of shooting flames at it. Or you're going to get into electric, which has a high level of control. It's very easy to work with. God, it is just night and day how easy. I mean, it's just so easy. It's like a dimmer switch. You just turn it on, you turn it off, whatever you want to do with it. But it does spin the meter. And because the process is so fast to gel and cure, that's where people, the line of sight issue comes up, where the higher temp you go, the less forgiving you are on line of sight. So as you get into electric infrared, you're typically in the 12, 14, 1600 range, operating range of what typically people are doing. And it's thicks and thins become almost impossible without a lot of design criteria and a lot of babysitting. You can cure almost anything in catalytic, large part because there's a lot of convection in there that happens intrinsically to the process, but also the way ovens are designed. And it's not, it's about 3 times faster than convection, but it's still fast enough to use conduction to cure those hidden areas because conduction is sped by temperature. That's how you make conduction happen faster. So that's the reason why, if the reverse of it, to cool a part, you put a fan on there because that cools it. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing, just, whatever your curve is. Electric is so fast that conduction never plays a role. And that's the reason you don't really see electric on the cure side unless it's one part in the oven. It might have a chain on edge where it's rotating or something where the oven is designed for the part. But in what you do for a living, your job shop, you're basically never going to see an electric infrared cure oven. Now you can obviously do electric cure oven in convection, but you typically only see that in batch, again, because it would be too expensive to do it in a flow through larger environment. Right. If I were to guess, your batch oven is, 2 million BTUs.
I think so. I think you're right. I'm actually working with somebody just to tease you a little bit, but I am working with somebody who builds ovens, and I'm trying to build a BTU calculator and stuff just to see. So people, when they're trying to spec, how big of an oven they need or try to plan out their shop and stuff, they know what kind of power requirement they're going to need. Right. Especially for startups and stuff like that. So we'll see how that goes. It's been a work in progress. It's not, it's easier said than done, but
that kind of stuff is so good for the industry. I mean, kudos to you. I mean, even if that's, I'm not trying to own the world and say I have to sell every oven that's sitting out there. I mean, you need competition to make a market healthy.
Well, I think People want to know, be educated about it before they come
Right.
and talk to you, Marty, or anybody else for that matter, any
Yeah.
other oven. They don't want to sound stupid. They want to sound educated. And if they don't know, they don't know. And so it'd be nice to have a free calculator, just to kind of like assist in helping them discover, the space versus what their needs are. Right.
And they, you have to make generalized assumptions to do any of that kind of stuff, but it's a starting point. And there's a few consultants out there who's done some of that, not that per se, because I think that's a fabulous idea. I think that's good for the industry. There's no downside to me in the marketplace having more knowledge.
Yeah, totally.
And because the most frustrating thing for what I do for a living is when you're competing against somebody who's just misrepresenting the facts. They just cherry pick data and, they just, guys, no, that's not how the physics work. I don't ever mind competing against a quality competitor because most people get 3 bids. So you got to have a competitor out there. You just don't want somebody cooking the books to get an order. Because that's going to end up with an unhappy customer. It tarnishes the industry. It tarnishes. It's all bad. It's all bad.
I think you covered what is combustion a little bit. Yeah, I think we can skip that one. This one is just more extensive on that. Anything else? I mean, should I skip through this one?
Yeah, they're all it's stuff we've talked about. This is just the ranges.
Yeah. Carbon reduction. Yeah.
So this gets in based on, again, thinking scope 1. And the reason why ultraviolet is 35%. And these are numbers that, I kind of just made my estimates. These are not based on scientific fact. They're based upon my knowledge of the research we've already done and just making some assumptions because these are, gross generalizations. Your results may differ.
Right.
But ultraviolet is going to need a melt oven. And depending on how you could do it in convection, you can do it in infrared. It's typically with infrared, but some people use convection. So there is a thermal component to ultraviolet, and that's why that's not 100%. But ultraviolet is a very clean technology from a carbon standpoint. Gas catalytic, we can talk about in a minute. And, electric, again, scope 1 is going to be 100%.
Right. Okay.
So this was fun. Years ago, we did this. I had a customer who had a catalytic oven and a convection oven. And that's when I probably did this in 2005 or something. So a long time ago. And it's just when I kind of started on this curiosity about how these technologies contrast and compare. And the one on the left is, and I didn't have a manometer at the time. I think that's right. I always get that word screwed up. It's kind of like electrification. Anyway, the one on the left is an infrared image of the convection stack. Mm-hmm. So if you were, you couldn't get within 5 feet of it, and the noise of the air, it's like a jet engine,
right,
coming out into the atmosphere. And you think about, God, all that heat you're paying for, you're just paying for it and just throwing it away. And you're going to do it constantly because that's the code. So the center one is the catalytic stack. And you can see, obviously, it's much cooler. It's at the very bottom where it's heated up a little bit because there's obviously some extra metal there. So it's heated up a little, you're under 200 degrees there. The other one's at 350. And then this is the top, one of my employees holding this, putting his hand above the catalytic stack. And it's a gentle, warm breeze.
Wow.
His hand could stand up there all day long. I know. Wow. I just love these because it's a good visual.
This is a great visual. And so, the title of the slide is environmental impact. And just to kind of show people how the industry can get there. We can get there, Yeah. Yeah.
So this is what I began when I said, all right, I need to start creating some data. So in our lab, we're going to have a convection oven. We've got 2 electric ovens. We've got 2 catalytic ovens, now 3. So I can run lots of different tests doing lots of different things. And sometimes I'll run the same part up at Protherm that I do down in Kansas City. And I cannot tell you how hard it is to get an apples to apples test. And I want it to be normalized. And it's really hard because you have to make certain assumptions. And does that skew the result? So this is just a sheet metal part, some kind of gauge. I don't know what gauge it is, a formed sheet metal part, and ran it in convection and then ran it again in catalytic. So I'm using the exact same part with the exact same powder, probing it the exact same way, and I'm running it in 2 different ovens and I picked a target temp that I wanted to get to, because this isn't, I didn't use this for a cure test. I use this, just pick a number. And the assumption, so that what I want to clarify here on the front end is when I ran these tests, the assumption I made is that all ovens are 100% on. So that means is there's no modulation. Once an oven starts to modulate, all bets are off. I can't begin to guess how any particular oven is going to modulate. Infrared ovens modulate all the time based on the not so much about the load. Convection oven will modulate based on load, because that's part of the calculation for convection oven. An infrared oven doesn't care about load at all. All it cares about is, how much fuel are putting in there. If you have fresh air going in there that might cool the emitters, or, whatever you're doing, you have a set point in an infrared, depending on how you design it, there's a set point you're looking at, and it will modulate the gas flow to maintain that set point up and down, depending on what's going on. The oven's cool or it's been running all day. There's lots of different factors. So that the caveat to all these tests is this is the time and temp it took to get to a same temperature on the same part using the same powder.
Okay. All right. So let's go to this next slide.
Okay. So that's the catalytic. And that part took a hair under 2 minutes to get to 300 degrees. So that was the temperature I was measuring against. So, there's my oven recorder, and you can see, how the numbers come out, because we will measure everything.
Okay. And then now the convection. Oh, wow. There's a lot.
So
that's
it got left on for a long time before we turned it off. So that's the reason the curve looks a little weird, but it's
almost 5 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. It's almost 5 minutes.
Yeah.
To get to 300 degrees.
Right.
So, just looking at how much more time and temp it takes to get to the exact same thing on the exact same part.
I know. I remember these 2 slides being in that presentation and being shocked. We've never done, not that we could do a comparison like what you have here, but we know how long it takes for our oven to get to temp, approximately. Let's just say the large one, or even the small one. We did do a simple hybrid test where we were experimenting with adding a gas, I guess you want to say boost, right? Is that what you said? Yeah, like a gas boost to kind of get it to temp a little faster. And we noticed a shocking significant turnaround time in powder coating. And it would be great if we could maybe somehow hybrid that, but the cost of, unfortunately, still we're dealing with the cost of gas. It just, after weighing it all out and doing all our tests for like a week or 2, we realized we were still burning or paying for more overhead just to save a few minutes. And I don't think we ever really got to this specific of a test in terms of time, but it was a noticeable thing for us. And then, of course, you have to weigh that out with the costs, the overhead costs that we incurred by having it. And we were having to, I think, fill the propane tank up, which was, I think we were running, I don't know if it was just a 50-pound tank or 100, I think it was a 135-pound tank. And we had to change it out every few days. So that's really expensive here for us. So I can sympathize with the difficultness of trying to achieve a result that is at least something that is, may not be 100%, 100%, 1000% accurate, but at least it's a test that got a result.
Right.
And that, awesome.
So, I mean, the rule of thumb is if it doesn't cost justify, you're never going to spend the money.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, equipment has to help you either make more money or save money. Otherwise, why would anybody buy anything? You're not going to.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so this slide is amazing, because you really kind of put it, it's like the sword into the, into the stone, so to speak.
So obviously it was 12 gauge. I had forgotten that. And so I wanted, because again, you can't contrast and compare two different ovens. So how could we do apples to apples? So we looked at the BTU capacity of the oven. So the convection is 1,000, a million BTUs, and the gasket oven we used was a little under 500. So, one's up twice the power than the other. And that is going to influence this and make convection look a little bit better because that was the only part running in that oven. But again, it's 100%. The oven had been preheated. It was at temp. You put the part in. It's a batch oven. Put the part in and wait till it gets to the 300 degrees. So then we just timed out, and you just look at the data packs and look at how much time did it take to get to temp, and it's giving you the seconds. And then it's just math, dividing in how many BTUs did it take to get to that time, that temp, and then the BTUs used per second. Again, we're just extrapolating it out. And up and right above, you'll see a little itty bitty tiny number. What is it? 117 pounds of CO2 per million or whatever. That's the formula, pulled it off the internet, that we used to get at how much CO2 was generated. So that's the assumption that's used. So this is just basic math. All you had to have was the size of the oven and those oven recorders to give you the number, and it ends up with an 82% reduction. I mean, it's shocking.
That is shocking. It is. And I mean, I can only imagine how long, I'm not very good at math, but still, even if you were good at math, that and figuring out how to measure it all and everything, that's just outstanding work,
Thank you. We were very pleased with the results. They're better than I was expecting.
Yeah. And this slide is so critical because everything we've just talked about, and here it is in black and white, right? That you haven't pulled this out of your, out of the space time continuum. It's some universe somewhere, and then plopped it on a graph. That all of this leads up to, and it's very logical. And I would have to agree, just in terms of the knowledge that we have with the purely convection oven that we have and the electricity. So there is nothing here in this slide that I can disagree with because we experience it here every day.
Mm-hmm. So then we did it again. This is an old test we did years ago, and I pulled it out and I said, I can use this again for this, because I did the same thing then because the customer wanted a convection test.
Is this the next slide?
So on our to-do list is to do, a dozen more of these, pick all kinds of different shapes and sizes and just keep doing it. Doing it. You just prove it out over and over. So this is a heavy weldment, all kinds of thicks and thins. And you can see by the picture where it is probed. So you can see the body, the yoke, the top of the yoke, you can see the thickness. Those bars that stick out, those are typically really hard to work with because they're solid metal. And the picture on the right is showing, after the double rub test was done, showing we got a clean.
That you did it right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the part is cured.
Right.
So the first one is the catalytic test. And often what you'll see in infrared is depending on where you probe, you're going to get some inconsistencies because your thin is going to heat up much faster than your thick.
Right.
but it took the target temperature on this one we just chose was 326. I have no idea why I chose that, but we're probably looking for 325, and that's just where I ended up. So 5 minutes and 50 seconds, so a hair under 6 minutes to get to the 326. And again, oven's full on.
Yeah, and I would describe that part for those that are listening. It looked like a jack, like, you know, like.
That's exactly what it is. It's a jack.
Yeah, a jack for a car. Yeah. So, yeah, that's and I love how, you know, you can see all, because you probed it in so many different areas, you can kind of see where it's all kind of around the same.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 probes on that.
Yeah. And here's the convection oven one, which is much further. The peak, it happens way further down the line. That it's the heat up process, right? The heating up of the metal that is taking the longest.
Well, you know, it's 26 minutes to do the exact same work in convection.
Yeah, right.
So, you know, when I'm looking at how to help people, you know, I want to, you know, originally when I did this was to help understand the speed, and, you know, thereby the oven is physically smaller. And how expensive are buildings right now? If you can shrink your footprint of your ovens and not have to, if you're building a new line and you're building a building to do it, and now all of a sudden I have a customer in Canada who says the amount of space they saved on their new building paid for the system.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was.
And I mean, what a compliment too. I mean, that he actually figured that out and, you know, came to that conclusion. You know, that's huge.
So this is the same calculation as I did on the 12 gauge part. Now, obviously this was done years ago. The oven was only 400,000 BTUs at that time. So it's going to take longer because you have less oven to work with. But again, it's full on. So you have less CO2 being generated because you're not pulling as much, you know, the capacity's lower. So, you know, one's higher, one's lower, it doesn't really matter because you're trying to create, just take whatever temperature you got to and how many BTUs at full on did that burner pull in gas. So we know that by how the oven is designed. There's only so much gas can go through that pipe. So you know what your maximum usage is. What you don't know is when you modulate, how much are you going to use? That's what, unless you have a meter on your specific piece of equipment, which I have yet to find somebody who does. Maybe I'm sure there's people out there doing it. I've just never talked to them, of somebody who actually measures the specific piece of equipment. They typically measure the line where it comes in, and it might power 15 different pieces of equipment. So the data all gets lost.
Right.
Because it's expensive to meter each piece of equipment. And to what end? Why would anybody do that? For what purpose? You wouldn't, because there's no value proposition.
But
now there is.
Yes, exactly. The very topic we're talking about.
So that one was 67% reduction, because when it's a little heavier, it's going to take more power. And so you're not going to get as much. So on a related topic to that, something that I think is really important, because now we're getting into, you know, what are the takeaways from all of this? And one of the things I heard somebody talk about, and I thought was very powerful, they were very concerned about regulations coming out and saying, you must reduce by X%. Because the only person that helps is the not the bad actor, but the guy who hasn't done anything, because they're starting from the beginning. So anybody who's been proactive on this and has already made steps, they've already dealt with the low-hanging fruit. They've already made investments. They've already done stuff. So it's a lot harder for them to get a percentage reduction. It's like comparing China to US. You can't, it's not the same. And they said what they would love to see, if there is regulations on this, is that it's something that is a function of your production, like per piece. Because then that takes into account how you're running your business and what you're doing for a living, as opposed to just some arbitrary percentage that may or may not, that's just complying with the man kind of thing. That's not truly changing the outcome, which is what what everyone's goal is in this process, is to actually reduce the amount of natural gas or whatever utility you're consuming to reduce that. And it's a much fairer way to look at the problem. But, I was just at a meeting earlier this week, actually, with a bunch of business owners, and I gave them a really short version of this. And I first asked them, how many of you are kind of thinking about worrying about carbon reduction? So out of a room of like 30 people, like 5 hands went up. Then I said, how many of you are worried and, really thinking aggressively? 2 hands went up. And these are all basically, most of them are manufacturers, industrial, other kinds of manufacturers and such. And they, for a lot of different reasons, maybe what they do for a living, blah, blah, blah. But that's where a lot of this is we have this spectrum of knowledge that's out there. And so much of the knowledge is wrong that it becomes really hard to figure out how even to help somebody. So, I want to know if somebody's came to me and said, I want to buy an infrared oven because I want to reduce my carbon footprint. And that's the most important thing to me. Mm-hmm. Then what I'm going to do is say, first of all, make sure you measure where you are now. Mm-hmm. Because if somebody wants to know your percentage drop, or even measure it by part or something, create a static measurement of where you are today so that if you make an improvement, you can actually prove out your point. Because otherwise, all I can give them is my data to say, look, they bought this wonderful oven that does this and it does that. But, I don't know how they ran it. I don't know what they did. I don't know what they ran through it. I don't know how they turned it on or off or any of that kind of stuff. But that's more than what they've got. But if you really want to deal with it, start, even if you're doing maintenance on your current oven, start with where you are. You have to put a monitor on your piece of equipment, which, is several grand. Then you start making your changes and see if you can see any improvement. It's a different form of oven measurement.
And isn't that kind of like what we were starting to talk about Powder Coating Week was automation and looking towards the future and what it all means, right? Some of the seminars and content that we covered that mm-hmm. week was about that, or just the little bits of just some of it, I think that, would it be concerning to you if you sold, say we were in the future some point and it's all metered and monitored and stuff like the customer you're just talking about, do you think that the industry or the powers that be, the government, the regulators, would they be able to come back at you and say, well, you sold them the stuff, right? I mean, I know I'm sorry, Marty. I'm sorry, Marty. But, that's kind of like scary too, right?
Yeah. But by the same token, I'm pretty, that kind of stuff I'm pretty good at being able, that's the beauty of educating, is mm-hmm. I'm not making wild claims. I'm saying scope 1, this is what I can do. This is based upon my data. When I put out a quote to somebody, I don't quote a performance. I'm quoting, this is what the oven I'm selling to you is designed to do. It's designed to get this max temperature. It's designed for this flow through rate. It's designed to have this many zones. Or convection oven, it has this many changes. Whatever the thing may be, you always want to state what you know you can control.
Right.
So I always make sure I say the caveat is your results may vary. I can't, unless I wanted to build 2 prototype lines, which somebody wants to pay me to do that. I'm happy to do it. 2 prototype lines where it's the exact same part, exact same powder, and exact same line speed. And, I can run this data in a real world environment. Part after part after part after part after part, run it for 8 hours in a day to find out, in the summer and the winter when, numbers can vary, heavy load, light load, brakes, all that stuff, turn downs, all that stuff that come into it. I can't even predict. I can make some guesstimates. I make educated guesses, but that's all it is. So the key is to not put yourself out there too far. I mean, say what you know, but it starts with data.
It is going to take data to solve and unravel a lot of these problems. Okay, so these last few slides, we're wrapping up here. Obviously, just to recap, obviously start with scope 1, right? What can you control in your shop? And, what's your target? Develop methods, start thinking about it. I mean, I think a lot of it is just awareness, right? I think we're at the awareness part of it, than, actually taking actions specifically. But for those that are more kind of forward thinking, might be a little further down here, have already been aware of it or are thinking about it now. Are you willing to replace and upgrade equipment? And that's something that I talked about with Kevin Corson a few months ago, in regards to a lot of these manufacturers will delay, and run their systems to, this because you're selling to them. They'll just hold out to the very end, right? And I don't know, are they even, if they are holding out to the very end to replace something, that's a lot of capital they have to put out for maybe something that might be changing in the future. Do you see a lot of these people that you're talking to? Are they there, or are they just not even aware at all and they're just thinking some other?
Oh my God. The big companies want my data. I mean, give me third party, give me anything. Yeah. They want a piece of paper that has a stamp on it that says, look, here you go. They're looking to check that box. And, as you and I both know, I get to check the fee box too. So I get to, 2 for 1. But that last one, if you invest any money, publicize it. That is the one that's so important.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to make and have that enter in your decision, even if it's just, it's the tiebreaker, or it's not even something you're worried about, still, we can market. I mean, this is marketing here. We're not talking, even if you're not that worried about it, and this is not something you care about, if you end up buying a infrared cure oven, or even adding infrared to your convection, measure something so you can publicize it so you can get some brownie points.
Points. Yeah, there you go.
Even if you're not that worried about it, why would you walk over such a thing that some, maybe not your whole market, but part of your market may really, really care about? I wouldn't necessarily be doing it if I was selling into oil and gas, selling them an oven. That might not be my lead thing I want to say to them. But if you're selling into a consumer products based company, absolutely take the wins where you got them. And that company that said they saved enough money to pay for this, I don't think it was a 1-to-1, but it was wildly significant. They had us, the ovens are all the same color as their powder booth. So it's very showy. It's all yellow. And the washer's stainless, and all the ovens are yellow. And you're not going to miss it anywhere. And they said the interesting thing they figured out is that it became a way to help them be the employer of choice. Who would have gone there?
Yeah.
And they said when they're bringing people in, they tour the plant. This might be for an accountant. Doesn't matter. They bring them in and they talk about it from the standpoint of, state-of-the-art investment. And it's so showy, you're not going to miss it. It's not just some weird piece of machinery. It's bright yellow. And I mean neon yellow kind of yellow. It's not quite to neon, but it's yellow because it matches a certain powder vendor who shall remain nameless. But if you started with a G, you'd probably know. Anyway, neither here nor there. So there's all big yellow lines out there, and they talk about the environmental piece. And they were the first customer that really valued that significantly. It wasn't the reason they bought it, but it was a contributor to the decision tree. But the economics is why they bought it, because they were building a building. They wanted to save that space. But when they talk to these, young people that they're hiring, they talk about their investment, and they talk about their environmental approach and their policy and all that kind of stuff. Then they start to really differentiate themselves in the marketplace and hiring people. And they said it's really helped. Who knew?
Yeah, I mean, hello, we just talked about it a little while ago. Millennials,
They
like that's
care.
what they
They
want.
care a
They care.
lot.
They care. And they want to see that their business that they work for is clean and visually and, inside and out, right? Because then somehow it gives them that confidence that maybe they, the grandpa that died of cancer or lung disease or whatever, I'm not going to be that guy, right? I don't know. So yeah, I think we're kind of already talking about it. Market opportunities here. Electric vehicles I went right to that one. Seems to be the topic in like every other thing Kathy Wood says, or Elon Musk, right?
Well, the powder industry, there are a lot of opportunities in the EV industry. I mean, it's creating a lot of new lines, a lot of new powder demand for, they have some different issues and challenges of what they have to powder coat. It's lighter materials. It's different. So it's creating, there's always a winner and a loser in this kind of stuff. The goal is, be proactive and be the winner, not the loser.
Yeah, it's true. I think I attended something with PPG CEO or something about the future of OEM painting OEM parts or something like that. And they were actually talking, like two-tone is a big thing and it's going to continue to. So how do you create a two-tone paint line? Because the two-tone look is going to continue to grow. Whether it's on wheels or cars or whatever, right? So might have to break for just a second, or maybe are we there? Can we wrap up? Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Marty, for coming on the show today, and we'll be happy to, I'll make sure to put all the links in the description so that people can reach out to you, including, LinkedIn and your website and everything. I certainly appreciate the time that you've taken to explain all this, and all of it is important.
Well, it was a fun conversation. This is my very first podcast. I was a little nervous at the beginning, but I think we've gotten over it.
Awesome. Thank you. Aloha.
Thank you.